The podcast that you are about to hear is one of the LNC Power series that Barbara Levin and I have been recording to share our knowledge with you about topics that influence and affect the success of your legal nurse consulting practice. In this program coming up, you will have a chance to get some tips on how writing for publication can make an extraordinary difference for you in your LNC business. And you'll get some practical suggestions that influence your success writing reports as a legal nurse consultant for attorneys. Stay tuned as we begin this new program, The Power of the Pen.
You are really going to hear from the best of the best when it comes to writing.
Okay, I have the chat open on my monitor over here, and I will watch for comments. And I'm so glad that you could join us today. You had the opportunity to hear about a critical skill that will influence your success as a legal nurse consultant, and that is how well you prepare reports and other documents for attorneys. This truly can transform your nursing career, your legal nurse consulting career. In this program, I'll be focusing my content on a couple of audiences. If you're a beginner, and many of the people in the program are just starting off their legal nurse consulting career, and then others of you have some experience, have some feedback from attorneys, and you may be looking to expand your reach. You may be looking for more clients. You may be looking for more cases from clients. A few of you are winding down your career and thinking about the next phase of your life. In this program, I'm going to share with you a couple of key concepts. One of them is, if you want to grow your business exponentially means through visibility. There are more people competing for the audience of attorneys than ever before. When I got involved in this field in 1987, it was much less crowded. It has become a bigger magnet for nurses in the last 10 years, last 15 years, and especially since COVID started drawing people out of healthcare and causing them to ask, I wonder if there's anything else that I can do with my nursing skills. The only way to get more visible is through drawing attention to yourself, attracting attorneys to you, and that's through what you write, whether it is through social media, whether it's through publications, whether it's through blogs on your website, whether it's through emails that you're writing attorneys. They are judging you based on how well you write. I have been involved in this publishing business now since 1986. When I had my first book published, which was this kind of a mauve-colored book, sort of opposite this figure that looks a little bit like a K with a line sticking through it. This was my first book, which was on nursing process and nursing diagnosis. It started as a workbook. I created the workbook with two other educators in the city of Trenton. We all worked in different hospitals, and all of us worked for nursing administrations who in 1984, 85 said, we've heard about this thing called nursing diagnosis, and it's going to be part of our nursing language. We need for you to teach the nurses in the hospital, what is a nursing diagnosis? And if you have been in nursing long enough, you may remember that initially there was some resistance from physicians because only physicians made diagnoses. We could say, we have our own language, we make nursing diagnoses. That workbook became a textbook after the three of us realized that we couldn't publish it as a workbook. We had to expand it based on what the publisher was requesting. And that textbook was used in nursing schools in the United States and in Portuguese-speaking countries, Spanish-speaking countries, and ultimately Japanese-speaking countries, of which there's one primary one. That first book led to 68 books and counting that I have either edited or been the co-author of or co-editor or have written. And I've also been an Amazon #1 bestseller for a total of 6 books. I joined the legal nurse consulting field, and one of the biggest drawing cards for me as an expert, and it may be true for you as well if you do expert work, is that attorneys look very carefully at your resume. Have you published? What have you published? The fact that I had that book, which is towards the bottom of this pile, these are all books that are part of my 68 total books. The fact that I had published this book immediately gave me more credibility. And attorneys, in their voir dire of me, would bring out the fact that I had published a book. And that was designed specifically to show the jury that as an author of a nursing textbook, I understood nursing practice. I built up a large independent legal nurse consulting business, which I ultimately sold. And then after a period of 5 years, I returned to legal nurse consulting and began working with attorneys again. I had a 5-year non-compete when I sold the company, which prevented me from working with any attorneys within a 500-mile radius of Flemington, New Jersey. During the early part of the 2000s, I was the president of the American Association of Legal Nurse Consultants, like Barbara, who introduced me at the beginning of the program. Both of us were on the board of directors for 5 years. And both of us have been actively involved in legal nurse consulting for decades. Currently, in addition to working with attorneys, I also serve as a coach and work with legal nurse consultants who want to build their business. What does being a published author potentially mean? The opportunities to speak both nationally and internationally can come to you as a result of being published. I have spoken to groups of nurses in all of these countries on the right-hand side of the screen, and have spent time teaching in all the major cities in Canada. That first book, as I mentioned, opened up doors and enabled me to testify as an expert witness on nursing liability issues for 20 years, medical, surgical. Lots of things happen on med-surg units. There are a lot of cases. And then I also served for 25 years as a Rule 1006 expert, also known as expert fact witness, which is a role of summarizing the medical records to explain them to the judge and the jury. And as part of the benefit of being published so many times in my leadership positions, I have a certain ability to say that I'm well known in the field of legal nurse consulting. 9 years ago, I started the Legal Nurse Podcast, which was the first legal nurse consulting podcast, and we continue to produce shows every week. We've got listeners in 107 countries around the world. So as we take the focus off of me and we focus on you, we want to focus on 3 primary topics tonight. One of them is, why are writing skills so important in this field? What are some essential writing techniques and tips that you can use immediately as a result of being with us for this program? And what is the power of publications? Why does it make a difference? I've given you a little bit of a hint on the answer on that question. So first of all, attorneys are incredibly detail-oriented. A word that is missing in a report can change the entire meaning of that document. If you omit the word not in a sentence when you should have not included the word not, it can change your conclusions as an expert, as a consultant, as a behind-the-scenes adjunct. In my experience, attorneys write well. They may have paralegals who are helping them with briefs, but they are the ones who are completing those briefs, who are doing the careful proofreading of an expert's report. And they are fixated because it is their business on how well their consultants and their experts are writing. Fabulous clinical credentials are great, but they're not enough. Fabulous knowledge of the healthcare is terrific, but it's still not enough. What's important is how well you can express yourself in both your verbal skills and your written skills. When you are doing a great job for attorneys, they share your name. They have listservs, just as we do. My clients often say to me, I saw on the listserv somebody was looking for a legal nurse consultant, and I recommended you. It is helpful, if not essential, to have a supply of satisfied clients who are telling their colleagues about you and recommending you. That repeat business is one of the best uses of your time and energy when you've made a satisfied attorney client and they come back to you and wouldn't think about working with anyone else. The word of mouth and recommendations and referrals are gold for you. When you write well, you also reduce your rework and your wasted effort. I see on legal nurse consultant websites, satisfaction guarantee. If you're not happy with the work that I did, I will redo it at no cost. That's great. But it's far better to not have to redo it, to make it right the first time. If you remember Deming, who was a quality assurance person who came back from helping Japan rebuild their economy after World War II, he talked about do it right the first time was one of his slogans. You want the attorney to be pleased and not have to go back and redo work. Yes, you might satisfy that attorney. Yes, the attorney will pay your invoice, but the attorney may never come back. So it's imperative that you understand what the attorney is looking for and you give the attorney a satisfactory work product the first time. When you have satisfied that attorney, you have far less difficulty getting your invoices paid. If your report has to be redone or your report is not on target and the attorney starts quibbling about the invoice, you know you're in for a long haul of trying to get collections in place. You don't want to have to spend your time trying to chase down attorneys and your dollars because they're unhappy with your written work product. We also have competition. It used to be when we would talk about competition, we were referring to people offshore, notably India and Pakistan or the Philippines, English-speaking countries where the people who were doing the work were doing it for far less per hour. Now you have not only those individuals, but you've got machines who are competing with you. There are a number of software products that are being marketed to attorneys with the premise that you can get fast turnaround, you can reduce your costs by having AI summarize medical records. I am not endorsing any of these products. I'm listing them as ones that I'm familiar with, immediately top of mind. When I think about AI programs, I think about these three programs. Expert Institute was likely the first one that we became aware of, and they were producing, when they first came out, very lengthy chronologies, and they are continuing to market those chronologies, as are the other two who are on the screen, who are saying, let's have AI go through the records and pull out the key things. Now, I want to clarify that they are using their own software. They are not putting medical records on ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude and saying, please summarize these records. That's a violation of HIPAA. The information that's embedded in those medical records should not be anywhere near the internet. These companies take pains to make sure that they are not allowing that information to be public. However, attorneys who are using software programs like these companies, as well as others, are saying to legal nurse consultants, well, why should I hire you? And in the past, before AI, you wouldn't even think that you would be asked that question. Well, I'm a human. Of course I can do a better job. Well, can you? And can you articulate what makes you different? You have the analytical capabilities that a machine does not. A machine can regurgitate and condense down information, but you have the analytical abilities to say, is that particular data point important? You may see something in the medical record that would, if you'll forgive the expression, go right over the head of the computer. It won't understand the implications of that. You can identify missing facts in documents. AI could summarize that there were vital signs, but you could identify that the vital signs were not being taken with the requisite frequency required based on the diagnosis of the patient or the status of the patient. Immediate post-op vital signs come to mind. You can also spot discrepancies because you have that understanding of how healthcare works. AI has been trained with medical records, but AI has never walked the streets, never walked the halls, never taken care of patients. It's only as a machine able to spit back what it finds in medical records. And I go through these arguments because you will be asked, if you haven't been asked already by attorneys, why should I hire you? Why are you different than an AI program? You can reply also that you focus on what's meaningful. Are there key things that are missing that are significant for this particular case? The second reason why writing skills are important goes back to what I talked about before in terms of writing for publication, becoming visible to attorneys. We used to say, if you don't have a website, you're not visible. We still say that. But now we're saying, if you're not writing for publication, if you're not writing on social media, if you don't have blogs on your website, or you don't have an account with Substack or Medium, if you're not sharing information, you're invisible. And that's a problem when you are looking to stand out among other legal nurse consultants. When you write from your clinical experience, you are displaying your authority. If you, for example, are like Natalie, who's here, and you've worked medical, surgical, and travel nursing, you've worked on a whole variety of units, you can say knowledgeably, I know what happens on a medical surgical unit. Or like Barbara, who works on an orthopedic unit and testifies on med-surg cases. She has authority because she has worked those areas and she knows what the standard of care is. And she has co-authored and co-edited books with me. She's got visibility and authority. Your writing skills open up new opportunities. People find you because of your publications. That nursing process and nursing diagnosis book led to me being invited to give a talk to a school of nursing in Pamplona, Spain, which is where they release those bulls every year and they chase the drunken young men who run down those streets trying to get away from the bulls. Believe me, those streets are very narrow and there is no way that you can escape those streets until they open out. And then there are fences and then the people launch themselves over the fences. I had a chance to go and to be the guest of this college and to give a talk to the people because they were using my textbook, which was translated into Spanish. Now that we've talked about why it's important, I want to focus on the tips that I shared with you that you can use immediately and take a look at reports that you have written or think about these in relationship to reports that you'll be writing in the future. Attorneys want clarity. They want you to write in a way that they can understand. They don't want you to write in nurse speak. It is a mark of an inexperienced legal nurse consultant who puts in the report, the whole report is verbatim from the medical record. The attorney wants you to explain it. I don't want to say dumb it down because that implies that attorneys are not smart, and they are very smart people. Unless they are a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, or some other type of healthcare provider, they don't understand medical terminology and abbreviations the way that you do. I can promise you that they will be grateful to you when you make it easy for them to understand. That's the key concept. Can you make this clear and simple and easy to follow? You don't get points for multi-syllable words that you don't explain. They want you to write in plain English, using language that they understand. They want you to spell out abbreviations the first time you use them. You can assume that they understand that HTN means hypertension, but they might not have ever encountered that as an abbreviation. You could put a glossary at the end of a report if you wanted to and list each abbreviation and spell out the abbreviation, and better yet, explain what it means if it needs to be clarified. They will be grateful when you make it easy for them so that they can follow your thought process and your conclusions. And they want full sentences. They don't want nurse speak where we drop off words from sentences. They also are focused on precision. This is where your detail-oriented part of your writing skills is critical. It makes a difference if you put the wrong time or the wrong date or the wrong year or the wrong name of the provider. If you misspell names of providers or medical terms, it reflects on your thoroughness. They don't want errors. I have been in a few depositions, and I remember them vividly because it wasn't something I wanted to do, where I saw a typo in a report that I had missed in proofreading. It happened only a couple of times of the hundreds of reports that I wrote, but I held my breath, hoping that the attorney would not notice that there was a typo in a word. That's what you don't want. You are striving for perfection when it comes to the details. Also, brevity applies to paragraphs, it applies to sentences. I used to teach that you should have no more than 10 lines in a paragraph. I didn't say 10 sentences. I said 10 lines. 10 lines means 10 lines of text. Now our attention spans are very short. Now the thinking is no more than 6 lines of text. That means breaking up long sentences. It means breaking up long paragraphs. Look for ways that you can chop your paragraphs down. We want white space, which gives our eyes just a little bit of space to pause, to reflect before moving on to the next thought. And they want information that's going to help them reach their outcome. When you are working for a defense attorney, they have a very different perspective on a case than a plaintiff attorney does. The defense attorney wants to minimize losses, settle the cases that are not defensible, and go the distance with the cases that they have a good chance of winning in the courtroom. Plaintiff attorneys have opposite perspectives. They have to satisfy their client. If they don't win, they don't get any money back to cover the expenses. They want only strong cases. They want you to help them get there. They want a maximum recovery for their client, which in our system gives the attorney maximum recovery. They want to measure success very differently than defense attorneys. What you say on the phone to your client when you are evaluating a case is critical in the analysis. What you put in writing becomes all important. There's an expression from when I've done expert witness work that say that you are held to the four corners of the report. You have to fully explain your opinions if you're an expert in a written form in those states that require expert witnesses to write reports. Not all states do. But if you miss opinions, you don't include them, you might be constrained from being able to share them later on. Attorneys want you to be consistent. They want you to follow the same format when you are preparing your reports, particularly when it comes to dates or titles. In other words, if today is July 16th, 2023, which it's not, I'm paying attention. If you write July 16th, 2023, and you spell it out in words, but then later on in the report, you say this happened on 7/16/23, the inconsistency draws attention to the fact that you're not using the same format. This is a field where the obsessive compulsives get rewarded. Making sure that your dates are in the same format consistently is critical. If you're saying Amanda Johnson, RN, in your report, then you should refer to her as Amanda Johnson, RN, throughout the report, or Nurse Johnson, but not RN Amanda Johnson, as opposed to Amanda Johnson, RN. Be consistent in titles. Also, don't say Dr. Bill Smith, MD, because that's redundant. It's either Dr. Bill Smith or it's Bill Smith, MD, but not both. Make sure that your formatting is consistent. You're tabbing over at the beginning of each paragraph, that you've got your report set up with either block format where everything is flush left, or tab over and indent the date, the beginning of the paragraphs, and the ending of your report. And they particularly want you to be coherent, to prepare them for what you're sharing. If you're doing a chronology, for example, they want the date in that same column everywhere in that chronology. If you're doing this in table format, if you're having the time goes in a separate column, the source of the information, and then the chart entry. That's an organized chronology that they can easily follow. If you're writing a report where you're sharing opinions, you might say, here are the 3 important reasons why this case has merit. Suppose you're screening the case. There's point 1, point 2, and point 3. Then you go back and give details about point 1. Move on to point 2. Finish up with point 3. You're laying the foundation for them, a nice legal term that they love, by giving them the outline. There is a reason why in high school, some of you learned how to outline a report. You had to do a research paper. Your teacher may have asked you to turn in an outline first, which forced you to think in terms of the points you wanted to cover in your paper, your report. When you're writing for attorneys, when you organize the content, they can follow it much more readily, as opposed to bouncing around throughout the report and not following any consistent structure. Transitions help the reader also by saying, the first point I want to make is this. Next, and then you provide more information. Lastly, or I will now, a transition statement might be in the rest of this report, I will now share with you the basis for my opinions. That gives the reader a transition from your initial comments and then carries them through your conclusions. And then flow is also critical. You might, for example, if you're writing a report, start with the summary of medical events, if you're writing an expert report. After listing all the documents you have reviewed, then you're summarizing the medical events, then explaining what is the standard of care, followed by how well do the providers follow the standard of care, depending upon whether you're writing a defense report or a plaintiff report. Your information flows from one point to the next, and that makes it very easy for the reader. You are often also, when you're writing for attorneys, you are trying to persuade them. You're taking a position and you're marshaling the information that will help support those conclusions. Now, we are not supposed to be advocates. We are supposed to be objective. We're supposed to provide, if we're behind the scenes, the pros and the cons of the case so that the attorney can make informed decisions. When you cite your sources, that supports your opinions. You do have to be careful if you're writing an expert report about the sources you cite, because the attorney very likely is going to hire a legal nurse consultant to look for those sources and find out if there's anything in there that is contradicting your opinions. Charts and diagrams can be very useful in a report that you're helping with the attorney. You can collect information. For example, if you were doing a summary of vital signs, you might put that into a chart with the time, the date, and then the readings that were in the medical record. Diagrams can be useful to help explain medical concepts to attorneys. And they want you to be relevant. They want you to focus on what is important for a particular case. There's a ton of information in a medical record. Not all of it is relevant. In fact, much of it is not relevant. If you're looking at a delay in diagnosis case and you're looking at office records, for example, you'll have all kinds of information in that office record, but you'll be focusing in on what were the patient's complaints, what were the tests that were ordered, what was the follow-up for the test results, should test results have been present and they're missing, were the appropriate tests not even ordered to begin with. Your focus is based on what the case is about and what the client tells you the case is about. And you're also, as you get more experience, you develop the skill of being able to say, if I were on the other side of this case, how would I argue it? What kinds of objections, what kind of points will the other side make so that you can help the attorney anticipate them and rebut them? Attorneys want you to be on time. When I first started my business, I hired one of my co-authors when I got an assignment to write some test questions for a staffing agency that wanted to test the knowledge of nurses that they were planning to hire to work for their agency. And they came to me and said, could you write some screening tests for a med-surg nurse, for a critical care nurse, for an OB nurse? I took on that assignment and I asked one of my co-authors, and it wasn't Barbara, let me be very clear, it was not Barbara. I asked my co-author, could you write one of these tests for me? And she said, sure. And the deadline was approaching and I wasn't getting anything from her. And I was leaving messages and she wasn't responding to me. And I started to get really nervous because I didn't have the clinical experience to write that test. And I didn't have any easy way to substitute her if she didn't come through. When I finally got her attention, I told her, this test is due at the end of this week. And if you turn it into me after the deadline is passed, I can't pay you. And she said to me, you mean I wouldn't get paid if I missed the deadline? I said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, she did turn it in on time, and it was well done. And it was my early experience in realizing that deadlines didn't mean the same thing to everyone. Some of the most anxious moments that I have had as a legal nurse consultant have been working with subcontractors who the attorney was calling and saying, I need to get your report in. I have a deadline and I'm not getting calls back. Pat, can you please contact this person and make sure they understand the deadline and when I need that material? That was the biggest source of concerns that my clients had a few times a year. It didn't happen every day. It didn't happen every month, but a few times a year I would hear, Pat, I can't reach the expert. I've got a deadline. Could you please contact them? And I would immediately contact them. Those deadlines could be ordered by the judge. Maybe the attorney can get an extension. Maybe the attorney can't. And you don't want to be in the midst of a legal malpractice case because the attorney's being sued by a client who's lost the case because the attorney missed a deadline. That's an extreme example. Very few legal nurse consultants have ever been sued. But if they do something that puts the case in jeopardy, the attorney can look at them and point the finger at them. Always be clear that you understand deadlines. Another thing that helps your writing stand out is the ability to take a step back and to edit. Ideally, you've had a chance to let that report percolate. It's settled down. You've been able to walk away from it, maybe overnight, maybe after several hours. It's always amazing the things that you find when you pick up that report again after some time has gone by and you see the things that you overlooked when you were proofreading. You're editing to make sure that you're using active voice, something that's a challenge for us as healthcare providers because we were taught to write in passive voice. Active voice is much more interesting and it's also much clearer. He was admitted to ICU is a different statement than Dr. Troy admitted the patient to ICU. Active voice says who did what, as opposed to the passive voice. Varying your sentence structure makes what you've written more interesting to read and avoids the monotony of starting every sentence the same way. And it's also critical not to use medical slang. We can talk about people who are circling the drain, and we all know what that means, but we would not put that in a report that we wrote for an attorney, or somebody was going south. There's any number of examples like that that are great for talking about patients in conference rooms behind closed doors, blowing off some steam. Some people would say, even then, you should be very careful about how you speak about patients. Their families could be nearby, outside the door. When you're writing a report, it is a document that many people will look at. They might be inside the law firm. They could be in the other opposing law firm. They could be a judge. They could be a jury. They could be a claims adjuster, a risk manager. Any number of people see your reports. You sometimes are surprised at how widely they are distributed. When you are editing, you're also looking to make sure that your format is consistent. You're using A period, M period, for example, and not and PUM, which are not abbreviations, by the way. It's either capital A, capital M, or small a period, small m period. And the same for PM. When you are proofreading, it's often easier to print it out. I know sometimes printers seem archaic. Fax machines have certainly left my life a long time ago, but I got a printer over here. I keep well supplied with toner and paper. I find it easier to locate those mistakes when I print the papers out and use my red pen and sit in my comfortable chair and then proofread with my pen. You can also read your sentences out loud to make sure that the sentences flow. You know that there are words that the spell checker will not find wrong, even though they are spelled incorrectly in the context of that sentence, but the spell checker is not going to find the difference between trail and trial, or form and from. Those kinds of common words that are spelled inappropriately. Principle with a PLE versus PAL is another one that trips us up. Don't depend on those tools. Make sure you understand that the words that you are reading are the words that you intended to have there. And it's also an opportunity when you proofread to look for consistency, to make sure that you're following the same format, that your numbers are correct, that you haven't transposed them or put in incorrect numbers. Also make sure that your punctuation is correct. That's also something that spell check has trouble with. Maybe that there should be a question mark at the end of the sentence instead of a period. And then also spell check can have struggles with medical terms. They may be correctly spelled, but spell check may not recognize them as correct. So let me ask one question as we move into the third part of this, which is what would being published mean to you? If you could put that in the chat, that would be helpful. What would being published mean to you? I see a few questions in the chat also. Dr. Marianne Cosby, RN. Yes, I think that's a legitimate way to combine RN and doctor, because doctor could mean a PhD, it could mean a medical doctor. WordRake and Grammarly, in my understanding, they are residing on your computer. They are not putting your document out on the internet, so it should not have any impact on HIPAA. And then to answer the question that I asked, what would being published mean to you? Natalie says promotion. Stephanie says, Denise says validation of expertise. Tammy says validation. Barbara says makes me more confident in my abilities. Christy says to have merit in the eyes of attorneys. Tammy says credibility. And Stephanie says validation of my experience. Yes, all of those come along with being published. There's also a financial incentive. Warren Buffett, who just announced, I think he's now in his middle 90s, maybe late 90s, he's decided that he is going to retire. The one easy way to become worth 50% or more than you are is to hone your communication skills, both written and verbal. We've talked about credibility and validation of your experience, your knowledge. It gives you, when you have written on a topic, it gives you the status of being an expert on that topic. You certainly have much more visibility. And as I mentioned, speaking opportunities can come along with this. Whether you are speaking at attorney conferences is one option to consider, whether that's plaintiff attorneys, defense attorneys, bar associations. Those are all groups that hold conferences and will invite nurses, particularly legal nurse consultants, to be speakers to their audiences. There are webinars and seminars online, another great option. Many of the states around the U.S. have maintained a mix of in-person as well as online education. COVID introduced us all to the ease of being able to get continuing education units by being part of an online conference, and the attorneys have seen the convenience for their members and invite nurses to be part of those presentations. There's also the market of paralegals who are in a position to recommend you to the attorneys in the firm. And then other legal vendors. Engineers can work with legal nurse consultants and hire them to review their cases. Private investigators may bring in nurses who have a forensic background. People who work on demonstrative evidence may collaborate with legal nurse consultants to read medical records, to interpret medical records. And you can also offer to go into a law firm and teach the attorneys at lunchtime on a topic that would be important for them to hear about, as well as to be a guest on a podcast. And of course, having an opportunity to teach legal nurse consultants is another great way to increase your visibility by being part of seminars and webinars, as well as online conferences like the ones that Barbara and I have been doing with our 12th conference coming up in November. And Legal Nurse Podcast is an interview program in which I bring guests on. We work out topics and questions in advance, and I encourage you to raise your hand and say, Pat, I would love to be a guest on your show. I make it easy, as anyone who's been a guest on my show can attest to the fact that I make it an extremely comfortable procedure and process so that the 30 minutes goes by very fast. When we focus on some of the bigger rewards, J. Conrad Levinson is a name that you may know. He was the one who developed Tony the Tiger as a marketing symbol. The Marlboro Man came out of J. Conrad Levinson's brain. He said that somebody once asked him how much he made from his first guerrilla marketing book. The answer I gave was $10 million. The book itself paid him $35,000 in royalties, but it was the other opportunities that opened the door for him as a result of his involvement in putting together that marketing book. And that resulted in the remaining 9,965,000. When we talk about publications, I'd like you to think in terms of all the ways that you can establish your expertise by writing blogs that appear on your website, a case study, always closed cases, please, not active cases, how you used your skills to help an attorney resolve a case. Those are powerful for attorneys. They combine results and they combine stories. Some of the people on the call tonight I recognize as being very active in posting on LinkedIn. You're sharing helpful information. You're demonstrating your knowledge. You're drawing people to you, and you're becoming memorable by consistently posting helpful information on LinkedIn. Substack is now starting to replace Medium in terms of popularity. Medium.com ran the roost for several years. Substack has advantages over Medium. It has different threads of information, and people can charge a subscription fee for having people read their material. One of the newscasters just recently left a news station and said he was going to open up his career with Substack and move from being on television to being able to influence people through Substack. Nursing and legal journals are another great source of places for publications. They are typically hungry for content. If you think about the news world, they have deadlines and they've got space that they have to fill. And that is always the focus, on keeping that pipeline filled with content so that they don't wake up one day and say, oh, I don't have any articles for next month's journal. They are way ahead of their schedule. And ebooks are another great way to share the information that you want to give to attorneys to attract them to your knowledge. There are lots of steps in being published depending upon what you're going after. If you are working on the premise of writing a book, for example, you have to have an editor to help you get started. You have to know what types of topics are going to be most important for your audience. If you want to write an article for publication, you have to follow the guidelines of that journal and then submit a proposal and wait to see if you're going to be accepted. If you want to write a book for a traditional publishing house, there are even more steps of identifying your title and your subtitle, what the book is all about, what are the outcomes that the reader will achieve, what makes your book special, particular features, what's the overview of the book, how long is it going to be, how much of it have you written, who is likely to promote your book, because publishing companies want to look first of all, is there going to be sales for this book? And then how is your book different than other books that have already been written on the same topic? Who are you? Why do you have credibility? Who could possibly endorse you? And what are you going to do to help promote the success of that book? They want a table of contents. They want outlines of every chapter. I have done book proposals for people. They have run 50 and 60 pages, single-spaced, answering all of these questions, including a couple of sample chapters. So we take a deep breath and inhale that beautiful mountain air. Let me ask you a question. In one word, how are you feeling right now? And I'd like you to put it in the chat. How are you feeling right now? I see excited, enlightened, motivated, relieved, filled, maybe drinking from a fire hose. in what we've covered. Dizzy, motivated, excited. All right. I'd like your permission to share an idea that will answer some of the questions that we've been addressing in terms of visibility and authority. How do you get the attention of attorneys? Excellent writing skills are helpful, essential. Being visible is critical. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where somebody has said, "Oh, would you like a copy of my book?" And you feel excited. You feel that that book, that person, you feel a connection to that person. You feel that's not something you're going to throw into a box and put under your bed or in a drawer. You've come away from conferences like I have with a stack of business cards, and you put them away somewhere because you're going to respond to those people. And maybe you do, and you should. But if somebody hands you a book, you're not going to throw that away. That is called a business card on steroids. You can change people's lives. Literally, you can change people's lives. You put together information that makes a difference for them in analyzing a case. They see you as the authority that can help them win a case. It's a much easier way when you are published to sell your services faster and easier in terms of the doors that are open to you. I'm finishing up this talk with you tonight to tell you about the medical record analysis book, the 4th volume. The first one came out in 2022, and it was and continues to be written by legal nurse consultants for attorneys and other legal nurse consultants. These are some of the authors who have been part of the book. And I know that some of them are here tonight. There's Mary Ann Cosby in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm pretty sure that I saw Tammy Sermons, who had signed in earlier. And there may be some additional people because I didn't see everyone who joined in as an attendee. These are some of the people who have contributed to prior versions of this book. Every one of the 3 prior versions became Amazon best-selling books in 4 categories. Each one of the books made #1 in 4 categories. This was the first book that we did that came out in 2022. And then the second book, volume 2, which came out in 2023. And in 2024, the 3rd volume, Medical Record Analysis, also an Amazon bestseller. Each one of them was a best-selling book. There are also opportunities that our authors have discovered by being involved in our chapter, in preparing a chapter for the book. Nancy Stuck, for example, was invited to be part of the Emergency Nurses Association core curriculum. And I believe that connection came through Mary Ann Cosby, if I'm not mistaken. Getting to know the authors and their expertise. So this is our plan. Right now, I am opening up this project for authors who want to join us. There is a self-paced video course that's available for the people who participate in this book. It takes a couple of hours to look through the videos. And in that process, you learn some techniques about putting a chapter together. You and I discuss your topic, and then you identify what you want to write about. I review the outline, and then you write the first draft. That will be due the end of August. If there is a need for changes, and they are usually minor, the second draft of that chapter is due the end of September. The book then goes into production, which means that I edit it. I have somebody who lays it out so that it looks professional. We get a cover made, and then we begin the promotions for the book. We have a book launch process that will take place the very beginning of December. And with all of us involved in that training, using social media, drawing attention to the book, it becomes an Amazon bestseller. The value of this program, the video course of writing your chapter the easy way, is a $997 value. That planning session with me, in which we go through your ideas and pick a topic that we both conclude is one that is easy for you to write, is going to be appealing to the attorneys who are going to be purchasing this book, as well as the LNCs who are in a position to recommend you. We make sure that your topic is right on target. That's a $500 value. And then this publishing package with the editing, the formatting, the cover designing, and the publishing process is a $1,500 value. I will be producing this book and publishing it through my publishing company, which is called LNC Success. And then there is also training that you receive. We have done different kinds of training for each of the books. We had a big book launch party the first time, and the second time I taught the people contributing chapters how to create carousel posts, which you can use then in applying those strategies for posting on social media. We used Notebook LM, and I created videos out of the chapters for our third book. And then each of the authors had the opportunity to post their own video as well as the videos of other authors in the book. We have a virtual book launch in which we invite attorneys, legal nurse consultants to get to know you, to hear about your topic, and to get excited about purchasing the book. You also have an opportunity when you participate in this to get to know your co-authors through the training. Who knows where that could lead? Opportunities for cases, collaborating with each other on other projects, getting work from each other. You can't do it all for your clients. You will need people that you can turn over work to, either as subcontractors or if you wanted to do it gratis. That bestseller campaign has a $3,000 value of learning how to take a publication and make it an Amazon bestseller. Authors in this book also receive the opportunity to purchase copies at a 50% discount, which runs about $14 or so, plus the shipping and the tax. And then you can resell those books. You can give them away if you're exhibiting. You can hand them over to your clients. I gave each of my clients for Christmas 2 copies of my most recent medical records analysis book, one for themselves and one to hand to somebody else. And we also give you a chance to be a guest on Legal Nurse Podcast with that worldwide exposure that I just discussed with you, the 107 countries. That's a total value of $6,997. I know that there can be a little voice in your brain that says, well, that sounds great, and Pat's done it a lot of times, but can I actually write? Will what I write be interesting to other people? Do I have the time to do this? Is this something that's possible for me? And I want you to think about the fact that you have valuable knowledge to share. And you're not doing this alone. You have the guidance of me. You have the guidance of your colleagues to cheer you on to make this a success. The chapters are 1,500 to 2,000 words. It's not impossible to write that length. You probably have written reports if you have been involved in legal nurse consulting for any length of time that are even longer than that. We talk about the topic very specifically, so you know what to write about. And I am your editor. I am the person who will help you in making sure that it's polished. This total program, this total package has a value, as I said, of $6,997. However, that is not the investment to be part of this program. You can become part of the project, have your own chapter, get that exposure for either a single pay of $29.97 or 2 pays of $16.50, which are 30 days apart. The link to become involved, to book your spot, is lnc.tips/MRA4. And of course, stands for Medical Record Analysis, the 4th volume. How quickly can you recover this? Average case could be 10 hours, could be 20 hours, 30 hours over the lifetime of the case. It's always hard to say, what is an average case? If we take that range, and your goal is to earn that $29.97 back, you need to spend about 10 hours if you're billing at the rate of $300 an hour. That could be an expert witness rate, for example. If you bill $200 an hour, that means that you'll spend 15 hours working on a case to recoup your investment. Or if you're billing at $150 an hour, that's 20 hours working on a case. And if you're billing at $100 an hour, that's just 30 hours. That could be 1 case, that could be 2 cases. Again, thinking about the exposure that comes with being part of this project, the opportunity for attorneys to know your area of expertise and to remember you and to have your chapter in a book that everybody else is promoting, you are benefiting from everybody's efforts. You're getting the video course, that planning session with me, the publishing package, the training that you can apply towards marketing yourself in other endeavors, other aspects of your LNC business, and the book launch, working with your co-authors and the Amazon best-selling campaign are part of this package, as well as the opportunity to get copies at a discount and hand them to people, that business card on steroids that we talked about before. You'll get worldwide exposure with your guest spot on Legal Nurse Podcast, totaling up $69.97. And you can join us at lnc.tips/MRA4. A full pay of $29.97 or 2 pays 30 days apart of $16.50. And that's the way to become involved. And let me check for questions in the chat. Let me stop my share. All right, let me look at the chat and see what questions came up. The chapter writer does not get any royalties because of the number of people who are involved in the project. The benefit for you is the cases, which quite honestly would be worth a lot more than the small percentage of the royalties divided among the people who are contributing to this project. Let me see. I don't see any other questions. We currently have approximately 10 people who are in this. It is a bonus for the people who are in my LNC Elite program. As part of their investment, they're included in the book. And I am actively looking to fill a few more spots. I will be closing this opportunity off at the end of this month. We have approximately 2 weeks left, and then I will close it and then I do this once a year. If you want to be part of volume 4, this is the time to join us. The opportunity won't come up again until a year from now. And thank you, Barbara, for saying a great opportunity to increase your visibility with the legal community and your legal nurse colleagues. All right.
This is truly an opportunity for everyone to learn from the best. So if you're considering writing, you want to have some type of work sample for your clients, for potential clients, this is the way to go. Invest in yourself, have Pat working with you, and you are going to be showcasing your abilities to potential clients. The beauty of this book too is that once your name is in there and your work is there, think of all the legal nurse colleagues that will be sharing this book with their attorney clients and others. And that way your name is going forward to other attorneys as well. So you will have a national presence. We've already heard from some of the authors who have written chapters that they've received cases from different parts of the country, which is a bonus.
Yeah, that is a consistent message that we have gotten. In fact, now that we're talking about the 4th volume, I have heard from authors of prior volumes that people who know them have said, well, when is the next book coming out? Because I want to make sure that I know about it. We already have some anticipatory buzz because we have established a track record of producing excellent prior volumes that sold well and have been helpful to attorneys and LNCs.
Some legal nurses have used these as grabs when they've been exhibiting at conferences. So they've met the attorneys, they're taking their business cards, and they will give so many away once they draw the business card out of the fishbowl.
Yes. Yes, that's true. That's a valuable prize.
It sure is.
Well, I see lots of thanks in the chat, and I'm glad that this was informative. I encourage you to keep focused on your writing skills, keeping in mind how critical they are when attorneys are judging legal nurse consultants. You want to be the one that they are selecting because you've proven that you know how to analyze the information and organize it in such a way that is helpful to the attorney. You cannot spend too much time perfecting your ability to write. That will serve you well when you're writing your reports. It will serve you well when you're sharing helpful information to attorneys, posting on social media, or participating in a project like this. It's the excellent writer who will be successful. And we'd love to see you in that category as the successful writer.
Please join us.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and I look forward to having you part of this project and appreciate your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you for being part of the Legal Nurse Podcast audience. I'm delighted that you've joined us for this episode. Be sure to go to legalnursebusiness.com and get your free reports. Look around the website, pick up some tools that will be useful for you in your legal nurse consulting practice. And be sure to join us for the next episode.